What if everything you thought you knew about ancient Sparta was wrong? What if, behind the legendary warriors and bronze shields, there existed a civilization of surprising beauty, wisdom, and gentle daily rhythms that could teach us how to live more peacefully today? Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through the mists of time, back over 2,500 years, to a place where the mountains of southern Greece cradle a valley blessed by the gentle Eurotas River. Here, in this peaceful landscape dotted with olive groves and cypress trees, lay one of history's most misunderstood civilizations, the real ancient Sparta. Tonight, we'll discover the Sparta that history books rarely reveal, not the harsh military state of Hollywood films, but a community where children played freely in sun-drenched courtyards, where women held unprecedented power, where music and poetry flourished, and where the rhythm of seasons marked time as surely as any clock. We'll walk together through the daily rhythms of Spartan life, not as warriors on a battlefield, but as quiet observers of a people whose lives were shaped by wisdom, community, and a deep connection to their land. Let the soft Mediterranean breeze carry away your worries as we discover how ordinary people lived, loved, and found meaning in this ancient world. The Sparta we'll explore tonight existed roughly from the 8th century BC to the 2nd century BC, nestled in the region called Laconia. Unlike the bustling marketplaces of Athens, Sparta was a collection of 5 villages that grew together like fingers of a hand, creating a unique community that valued stability, honor, and the bonds between its people. As we begin our journey, imagine the warm golden light of dawn creeping across the Taygetus Mountains, casting long shadows across terraced hillsides where olive trees have grown for centuries. The air is crisp and clean, filled with the scent of wild herbs. Thyme, oregano, and lavender, that carpet the hillsides in purple and white blooms. This is not the Sparta of Hollywood films or dramatic battle scenes. This is the Sparta of daily life, where children played in dusty courtyards, where women managed households with quiet strength, where elders shared stories under star-filled skies, and where the rhythm of seasons marked time as surely as any clock. Let yourself settle deeper into comfort as we prepare to step into their world. In the gentle morning light, Spartan homes begin to stir with the quiet activities of daily life. These homes were simpler than you might imagine, not grand palaces, but practical dwellings built from local stone and timber, designed to shelter families through the changing seasons. Picture a typical Spartan home: low, rectangular buildings with thick walls that kept the interior cool during hot summers and warm during mild winters. The roofs were covered with terracotta tiles that glowed like burnished copper in the morning sun. Small windows, covered with wooden shutters, could be opened to let in the Mediterranean breeze. There were no glass windows as we know them. Instead, these openings were designed to provide just enough light while maintaining privacy and protection from the elements. Inside, the floors were made of packed earth, sometimes covered with simple mats woven from reeds that grew along the Eurotas River. The furniture was practical and sparse. Low tables, simple stools, and storage chests carved from local wood. Oil lamps made from clay provided light in the evenings, their flames dancing gently and casting warm, flickering shadows on the walls. The heart of every Spartan home was the hearth, a circular area in the main room where a fire burned almost continuously. This fire served many purposes: cooking meals, providing warmth, and creating a gathering place where families would share their evening meal and stories of the day. The smoke would rise through a simple opening in the roof, carrying with it the aromas of cooking food and burning olive wood. Spartan families were typically smaller than those in other Greek cities. Children were precious, and their upbringing was a community concern. In the morning, you might hear the soft murmur of a mother's voice as she prepared the day's first meal, perhaps barley porridge mixed with honey, figs, or olives. The grinding of grain with a stone quern would create a rhythmic, almost meditative sound that became part of the morning's gentle symphony. Spartan women held a unique position in the ancient Greek world. Unlike women in Athens, Spartan women could own property, engage in business, and speak freely with men. Archaeological evidence from sites like the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia shows us that women played important roles in religious ceremonies and community life. As the household awakens, children would emerge from their sleeping areas, simple rooms with straw mattresses covered in woolen blankets. Spartan children, both boys and girls, were encouraged to be strong and healthy from an early age. They would run barefoot through the house and courtyard, their laughter mixing with the morning sounds of bleating goats and the distant call of shepherds leading their flocks to pasture. The courtyard was an essential part of every home, an open space surrounded by the house's walls where much of daily life took place. Here, women would weave wool into cloth using simple looms, their fingers working steadily while they chatted with neighbors or supervised their children's play. The click of the loom and the soft conversation of women created a peaceful background rhythm to Spartan domestic life. In these courtyards, small gardens might flourish with herbs essential for both cooking and medicine. Mint for digestive ailments, rosemary for preservation and flavor, and sage for its healing properties. Grapevines often climbed the courtyard walls, providing both shade and the grapes that would be dried into raisins or fermented into wine. As morning progressed toward midday, the sounds of the household would shift and change. The soft scrape of pottery being washed, the gentle splash of water being drawn from the household well, the rhythmic pounding of clothes being cleaned at the washing stones, all of these sounds wove together into the peaceful tapestry of Spartan domestic life. The relationship between husband and wife in Sparta was based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Spartan marriages were often arranged, but they emphasized the importance of producing healthy children who would grow to serve their community. Historical sources, including Plutarch's writings, tell us that Spartan couples often maintained separate living spaces even after marriage, meeting primarily for meals and intimate moments, which may have helped maintain the romance and respect in their relationships. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the morning activities settled into the steady rhythm of daily work, the Spartan home became a place of quiet industry and contentment, where each family member knew their role and took pride in contributing to the well-being of their household and, by extension, their broader community. As the Mediterranean sun reaches its gentle peak, casting short shadows in the courtyards of Sparta, the daily rhythm of life settles into its most productive hours. The harsh heat we might imagine is tempered by cool breezes that flow down from the mountains, creating an almost perfect climate for the quiet work of civilization. In Sparta, unlike other Greek cities, most citizens were free from the burden of manual labor. The Spartans had developed a unique social system where the Helots, people from conquered territories, performed the agricultural work, while the Spartans themselves focused on governance, military training, and what they considered the higher pursuits of citizenship. This arrangement, while complex in its social implications, created a society where contemplation and community bonds could flourish. Picture the Perioeci, the free non-citizens who lived in surrounding communities, going about their specialized crafts. These skilled artisans created the beautiful pottery, metalwork, and textiles that made Spartan life comfortable and aesthetically pleasing. In workshops scattered throughout the 5 villages that made up Sparta, you could hear the gentle rhythm of hammers shaping bronze, the soft whisper of clay being turned on pottery wheels, and the steady click of looms creating the distinctive red cloaks that became synonymous with Spartan identity. The famous Spartan red cloaks, or himation, were not just military garments but everyday wear that connected every citizen to their community identity. These cloaks were dyed with a rich crimson color obtained from kermes, tiny insects that lived on oak trees. The process of creating this dye was time-consuming and meditative. The insects were carefully collected, dried in the sun, and then ground into a powder that would be mixed with various mordants to create the lasting, vibrant red that could withstand years of wear. Mealtime in Sparta was a communal affair that reinforced social bonds. The famous syssitia, communal dining halls, were not grim military institutions but rather places where men gathered to share food, conversation, and companionship. Archaeological excavations at sites like the Spartan Agora have revealed dining areas with simple stone benches and tables where these meals took place. The meals themselves were simple but nourishing. The famous black broth that other Greeks mocked was likely a hearty blood sausage soup made with pork blood, vinegar, and barley, similar to dishes still enjoyed in Mediterranean countries today. This was accompanied by bread made from barley and wheat, olives from the groves that dotted the Laconian landscape, cheese made from goat and sheep milk, and wine mixed with water in the traditional Greek fashion. Women had their own dining traditions, often gathering in each other's homes or in spaces connected to religious sanctuaries. These gatherings were opportunities to share not just food, but news, stories, and the wisdom that passed from mother to daughter through generations. They might enjoy delicacies like honey cakes sweetened with the abundant wildflower honey from the hillside beehives, or fresh fish from the Eurotas River prepared with herbs from their gardens. The afternoon hours brought a gentle lull to Spartan life. This was time for rest, reflection, and quiet activities. Children might gather in the shade of olive trees to hear stories from their elders, tales of heroes and gods, but also practical wisdom about life, relationships, and their place in the community. These storytelling sessions served as both entertainment and education, passing down the values and knowledge that held Spartan society together. Young men who were not yet full citizens spent their afternoons in various forms of physical and intellectual training. But this wasn't the harsh, militaristic drilling often depicted in popular culture. Much of it resembled what we might call sports or dance today. They practiced wrestling, running, and discus throwing, activities that built both physical strength and grace of movement. They also learned music, poetry, and the art of conversation. Archaeological evidence from the sanctuary of Apollo at Amyclae, just a few miles from Sparta, shows us that music and dance were integral parts of Spartan culture. Young people would gather to practice choruses that would be performed at religious festivals. The sound of lyres and flutes would drift across the countryside as groups rehearsed, their voices blending in harmonies that celebrated both their gods and their community bonds. As the afternoon progressed toward evening, the pace of life would gradually slow. Craftspeople would begin to clean their workshops, storing their tools with care for the next day's work. The scent of cooking fires would begin to drift from homes and communal kitchens as preparations began for the evening meal. The Spartan approach to time was cyclical rather than linear. Days flowed into weeks, weeks into months, and months into seasons with a natural rhythm that connected human activity to the larger patterns of nature. There was time for work and time for rest, time for solitude and time for community, time for the practical necessities of life and time for the spiritual and intellectual pursuits that gave life deeper meaning. This balance created a society where stress, as we understand it today, was largely unknown. People knew their place, understood their roles, and found satisfaction in contributing to something larger than themselves while still maintaining their individual dignity and personal relationships. As evening shadows begin to lengthen across the Laconian Valley, let us turn our attention to one of Sparta's most distinctive features, the way they nurtured and educated their young people. Far from the harsh boot camp often depicted in modern stories, Spartan education was a comprehensive system designed to create well-rounded individuals who could contribute meaningfully to their society. Spartan children began their formal education around the age of 7, but their learning started much earlier in the loving embrace of their families. Infants and toddlers were raised with careful attention to their physical and emotional development. Spartan mothers were known throughout Greece for their wisdom and strength, and they took great pride in raising children who were both physically robust and emotionally secure. The famous story of Spartan mothers telling their sons to come back with your shield or on it represents only one facet of a much more complex relationship. Archaeological evidence from burial sites shows us that Spartan families grieved deeply for lost children and celebrated their achievements with genuine joy. The Spartan mother was expected to be strong, yes, but also nurturing, wise, and deeply involved in her children's development. Young children of both sexes spent their early years learning through play and observation. They would run freely through olive groves, their feet becoming tough and sure on the rocky ground. They learned to swim in the clear pools of the Eurotas River, their laughter echoing off the water as they splashed and played with their friends. This outdoor lifestyle created children who were comfortable in nature, physically confident, and unafraid of the elements. Around age 7, boys entered the Agoge system, but this was not the brutal ordeal often portrayed in popular culture. Recent scholarship, particularly the work of scholars like Nigel Kennell at the University of Auckland, has revealed that the Agoge was more like a boarding school system that emphasized character development, intellectual growth, and community bonding alongside physical training. Boys were organized into groups called Age Lai, led by older youth who served as mentors and guides. These groups functioned like extended families, creating bonds that would last throughout their lives. The older boys taught the younger ones not through harsh discipline, but through example, encouragement, and the gradual sharing of responsibility. The curriculum included music and poetry alongside physical training. Spartan boys learned to play the lyre, to sing in choruses, and to compose verses that celebrated their heritage and values. The Spartans believed that music developed both intellectual discipline and emotional expression, qualities essential for leadership and citizenship. Physical training took place in beautiful natural settings. Boys would practice wrestling in groves dedicated to various gods, run races along paths that wound through hills fragrant with wild herbs, and practice swimming and diving in natural pools fed by mountain springs. The goal was not to create mindless warriors, but to develop young men who were comfortable with their bodies, confident in their abilities, and respectful of their natural environment. Intellectual education included the study of law, philosophy, and practical governance. Young Spartans learned the principles that governed their society, the reasons behind their customs, and the skills necessary to participate effectively in community decision-making. They studied the works of poets like Tyrtaeus, whose verses celebrated not just martial valor, but civic virtue, justice, and the importance of contributing to the common good. Girls received their own form of education that was revolutionary for the ancient world. Unlike girls in other Greek cities, Spartan girls participated in physical training, learned to read and write, and were expected to develop their intellectual capabilities. They practiced gymnastics, dance, and various athletic competitions that built both physical strength and grace of movement. The education of Spartan girls took place in groups supervised by older women who served as mentors and guides. These groups would gather in sacred groves or near temples, creating learning environments that were both beautiful and spiritually meaningful. Girls learned domestic skills, but they also studied music, poetry, and the principles of leadership that would serve them well as adult women managing households and participating in community life. Both boys and girls participated in religious festivals that were central to Spartan education. These festivals, such as the Gymnopedii and the Carnea, combined religious observance with artistic performance, athletic competition, and community celebration. Young people would spend months preparing for these events, learning choreographed dances, practicing musical performances, and creating costumes and decorations. The Hyacinthia, a 3-day festival honoring Apollo and the mythical youth Hyacinthus, was particularly important for young Spartans. The first day was solemn, commemorating death and sacrifice. The second and third days were joyful celebrations of renewal and life. Young people would process through the streets of Sparta wearing crowns of flowers, singing hymns, and performing dances that told stories of their gods and heroes. These festivals taught young Spartans about the full spectrum of human experience, joy and sorrow, individual achievement and community responsibility, the importance of honoring the past while looking forward to the future. They learned that life was not just about personal success, but about contributing to something beautiful and meaningful that would outlast any individual lifetime. As boys approached adulthood, they gradually took on more responsibility within their groups. They learned to make decisions collectively, to resolve conflicts peacefully, and to support community members who were struggling. The emphasis was on developing judgment, empathy, and the ability to put the needs of others before their own immediate desires. The transition to full citizenship was marked by ceremonies that celebrated both individual achievement and community acceptance. These rites of passage took place in sacred locations throughout Laconia, connecting young Spartans to the landscape that had shaped their ancestors for generations. By the time they reached adulthood, both young men and women had developed into individuals who were physically capable, intellectually curious, emotionally mature, and deeply committed to their community's well-being. They had learned not just skills and knowledge, but wisdom, the ability to apply what they knew in service of justice, beauty, and the common good. As the sun begins its gentle descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gold, we turn our attention to the spiritual heart of Spartan life. Religion in ancient Sparta was not a separate compartment of existence, but rather the golden thread that wove through every aspect of daily life, connecting individuals to their community, their ancestors, and the natural world that surrounded them. The Spartan pantheon was rich and diverse, reflecting both their Greek heritage and their unique local traditions. Apollo, the god of music, poetry, and prophecy, held a special place in Spartan hearts. His sanctuary at Amyclae, just a short walk from the main settlements, was one of the most beautiful religious sites in all of Greece. Here, a magnificent statue of Apollo, created by the artist Bathocles, rose nearly 40 feet high, decorated with scenes from mythology and Spartan history. Archaeological excavations at Amyclae have revealed that this was not just a place of worship, but a center of community life where people gathered for festivals, markets, and social events. The sanctuary was surrounded by gardens where sacred olive trees provided both beauty and practical offerings of oil for religious ceremonies. The sound of wind through these ancient branches created a natural music that worshippers believed was Apollo's own voice speaking to his people. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, was equally beloved by the Spartans. Her sanctuary at Orthia was the site of one of Sparta's most important coming-of-age ceremonies. Young people would dance and compete in her honor, demonstrating their grace, skill, and dedication to the goddess who protected both the hunt and childbirth. The sanctuary has yielded thousands of small lead figurines, offerings left by worshippers seeking Artemis's blessing for everything from safe journeys to successful marriages. The religious calendar provided a comforting rhythm to Spartan life. Each month brought its own festivals and observances, creating anticipation and celebration that marked the passage of time. The Carnea, held in late summer, honored Apollo as protector of flocks and crops. For 9 days, the entire community would participate in processions, sacrifices, and competitions that celebrated the year's harvest and asked for the gods' continued protection. During the Carnea, temporary shelters called skinae were erected throughout Sparta, decorated with branches, flowers, and offerings. Families would gather in these shelters to share special meals and tell stories of Apollo's protection over their ancestors. The festival created a sense of unity and gratitude that strengthened community bonds and reminded everyone of their dependence on divine favor and natural abundance. The Hyacinthia, spanning 3 days in early summer, told the story of Apollo's beloved companion Hyacinthus, who was accidentally killed during a discus-throwing contest. The first day was marked by mourning and remembrance of all who had died in service to their community. People would visit graves, leave offerings of flowers and food, and share memories of loved ones who had passed away. But grief was balanced by celebration. The second and third days of the Hyacinthia exploded with joy, music, and dancing. Young people wore their finest clothes, crowned with flowers, and processed through the streets singing hymns of praise to Apollo. The festival reminded Spartans that death was part of life's natural cycle, but that beauty, love, and community would always triumph over sorrow. Private devotion was as important as public ceremony. Each Spartan home had its own household shrine, typically a simple niche in the wall where small statues of protective deities were placed alongside offerings of food, flowers, and incense. These shrines were tended daily by family members, usually the mother, who would light oil lamps in the evening and offer prayers for her family's health, safety, and happiness. The gods were not distant, fearsome beings, but rather loving protectors who took an active interest in human affairs. Spartans would consult oracles before making important decisions, leave thank offerings after successful endeavors, and seek divine guidance during times of uncertainty. This relationship with the divine created a sense of security and purpose that permeated every aspect of life. Women played particularly important roles in Spartan religious life. They served as priestesses in major temples, organized religious festivals, and maintained many of the traditions that connected the community to its spiritual roots. The priestess of Athena Chalkioikos, whose temple stood on Sparta's Acropolis, was one of the most respected figures in the city, consulted by leaders on matters of both spiritual and practical importance. Mystery cults also flourished in Sparta, offering initiates deeper spiritual experiences and the promise of divine protection in this life and the next. The cult of the Kabaroi, centered on the nearby island of Samothrace, was particularly popular among Spartans who sought spiritual transformation and a more personal relationship with the divine. Sacred groves dotted the Laconian countryside, each dedicated to a particular deity and maintained by local communities. These groves served as places of retreat and contemplation where individuals could escape the demands of daily life and commune with nature and the divine. The rustling of leaves, the song of birds, and the play of sunlight through branches were all seen as manifestations of divine presence. The Spartans believed that their gods walked among them, sometimes appearing in human form to test mortals' hospitality and virtue. This belief encouraged generous treatment of strangers and constant attention to moral behavior. Every encounter was potentially sacred, every act of kindness a form of worship. Seasonal celebrations connected Spartan spiritual life to the natural rhythms of the Mediterranean world. Spring festivals celebrated renewal and fertility, with young people dancing around sacred trees and pools. Summer festivals honored the gods of agriculture and abundance. Autumn celebrations gave thanks for the harvest and prepared for winter's contemplative months. These spiritual practices created a sense of meaning and belonging that sustained Spartans through both joy and hardship. They understood themselves as part of a cosmic order that included gods, nature, ancestors, and future generations. This perspective encouraged both personal responsibility and community cooperation, creating a society where individual fulfillment and collective well-being were understood as complementary rather than competing values. As our journey through ancient Sparta draws toward its peaceful close, like the gentle twilight that now embraces the Laconian valley, let us reflect on the complete cycle of Spartan life, from the joy of birth to the wisdom of old age. In this society where every individual was valued as part of a greater whole, each stage of life brought its own gifts, responsibilities, and sources of meaning. Birth in Sparta was cause for community celebration. Unlike some ancient societies where only male children were welcomed, Spartans rejoiced in both sons and daughters, understanding that both were essential for their society's continued flourishing. When a child was born, neighbors would gather to offer gifts and blessings, olive oil for anointing, honey for sweetness in life, and small amulets for protection. The naming ceremony, held when the child was 7 to 10 days old, took place at the family's household shrine in the presence of relatives and friends. The baby would be carried outside to see the sun for the first time, symbolically welcomed into the world of light and community. Elders would offer prayers to the gods for the child's health and happiness, and the family would share a feast that strengthened bonds between generations. Spartan children grew up surrounded by love and attention from not just their parents, but the entire community. Neighbors helped watch over children playing in courtyards and streets. Elders would stop to talk with youngsters, sharing stories and gentle wisdom. This communal approach to child-rearing created young people who felt secure in their identity and confident in their place within society. The teenage years brought new freedoms and responsibilities. Young Spartans participated in their first major religious festivals as full performers rather than observers. They took on roles in community service, helping to maintain public spaces, assist elderly citizens, and support local craftspeople. These activities taught practical skills while reinforcing the values of service and cooperation that lay at the heart of Spartan society. Marriage in Sparta was considered a joyful union that brought together not just two individuals, but two families and their extended networks of friends and allies. Wedding preparations could take months, involving the entire community in creating celebrations that would be remembered for years. Brides wore special garments woven with symbols of fertility and protection, while grooms received blessings for strength and wisdom in their new role as husbands and potential fathers. The wedding ceremony itself typically took place in late spring or early summer, when the countryside was at its most beautiful. Processions would wind through olive groves and flower-filled meadows, accompanied by music and singing that could be heard for miles. The celebration would continue for several days, with feasting, dancing, and competitions that brought joy to everyone involved. Young married couples were supported by their extended families and neighbors as they established their own households. Experienced women would share practical advice about managing homes and raising children, while older men would mentor new husbands in the responsibilities of citizenship and leadership. This support network ensured that young families had the resources they needed to flourish. Parenthood brought new dimensions of meaning to Spartan life. Mothers took pride in raising children who were healthy, intelligent, and morally grounded. Fathers delighted in teaching their children about their heritage, their responsibilities, and their place in the larger community. Both parents understood that their primary job was not to control their children, but to prepare them to make wise, independent decisions throughout their lives. Middle age in Sparta was considered the prime of life, when individuals had gained enough experience to contribute meaningfully to community leadership while still possessing the physical energy to remain active in all aspects of society. This was the time when Spartans might serve in important civic roles, lead religious ceremonies, or be chosen to represent their community in dealings with other cities. Spartan women in their middle years often became influential figures in religious and social life. They might serve as priestesses, organize festivals, or act as matchmakers and counselors for younger families. Their wisdom was highly valued, and they often played crucial roles in resolving disputes and maintaining community harmony. As Spartans entered old age, they were not discarded or ignored, but rather honored as living repositories of wisdom and experience. Elderly citizens held special places in religious ceremonies, their voices adding dignity and gravitas to community celebrations. They were consulted on important decisions, their opinions valued because of their long perspective on what had worked well in the past and what had caused problems. Elderly Spartans often became storytellers and teachers, passing on not just facts and skills, but the deeper wisdom that came from a lifetime of experience. They would gather young people around them in the evenings, sharing tales of heroism and adventure, but also stories about kindness, forgiveness, and the importance of treating others with respect and compassion. The approach to death in Sparta was characterized by the same balance between individual dignity and community support that marked every other aspect of life. When someone was dying, family and friends would gather to provide comfort and companionship. The dying person was encouraged to share final wisdom and blessings with loved ones, creating a sense of completion and continuity. Spartan funerals were not grim affairs, but celebrations of a life well lived. The deceased would be honored with speeches that recalled their contributions to the community, their acts of kindness and courage, and the positive impact they had made on others' lives. These ceremonies helped the grieving process while also inspiring the living to make their own lives meaningful and worthwhile. Memorial practices ensured that the deceased remained part of the community even after death. Families would visit graves regularly, leaving offerings of flowers, food, and wine. They would share memories and ask for the continued protection and guidance of their departed loved ones. This connection between the living and the dead created a sense of continuity that helped Spartans face life's uncertainties with courage and hope. The cycle would begin anew with each birth, each marriage, each new generation that would carry forward the values, traditions, and wisdom of their ancestors while adapting them to meet new challenges and opportunities. In this way, Spartan society achieved a form of immortality, not through the deeds of individual heroes, but through the patient, loving work of creating and maintaining a community where every person could find meaning, dignity, and joy. As our journey through ancient Sparta comes to its gentle end, like a peaceful sunset settling over the Taygetus Mountains, we can carry with us the timeless wisdom of this remarkable civilization. The Spartans we have encountered tonight were not the one-dimensional warriors of popular imagination, but complex, thoughtful people who created a society based on community, balance, and the understanding that true strength comes not from individual achievement, but from the bonds that connect us to each other and to something greater than ourselves. In their emphasis on education that developed both body and mind, we see the importance of nurturing every aspect of human potential. In their respect for women and elders, we discover values that transcend historical periods. In their spiritual practices that connected daily life to cosmic meaning, we find inspiration for our own search for purpose and belonging. The gentle rhythms of Spartan life, the cycle of seasons, the balance between work and rest, the integration of individual growth with community responsibility, offer us a model for living that emphasizes quality over quantity, depth over superficiality, and wisdom over mere information. As you drift toward sleep, let yourself imagine one final scene from ancient Sparta, a warm summer evening, with the last light of day glowing softly on white stone houses. Families gather in their courtyards for the evening meal, children's laughter mixing with the murmur of adult conversation. Somewhere, a lyre plays a gentle melody, and voices join in harmony, singing an ancient song of thanksgiving for the day's blessings. The stars begin to appear in the clear Mediterranean sky, the same constellations that have watched over humanity for thousands of years. In this peaceful moment, the Spartans knew, as we can know, that we are part of something eternal, a continuous human story of love, learning, and the endless quest to create communities where every person can flourish. Let their peace become your peace. Let their wisdom guide your dreams. And wake tomorrow knowing that you, like they, are part of humanity's beautiful, ongoing story. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with olive groves and gentle breezes, with the sound of distant music and the warmth of community love.